Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 2, Chapter 30. As in all places where human beings congregate, so in the little German village where the Sherbatskys went to take the waters, there's formed a sort of social crystallization which puts everyone in exact and unchangeable place. Just as a drop of water exposed to the cold always and invariably takes a certain crystalline form, so each new individual coming to the spa finds himself invariably fixed in the social seal. Fürst Scherbatsky samt Gemeilen und Tochter, both by the apartments that they occupied, and by their name and their acquaintances that they made, immediately crystallized into the exact place that was predestined to receive them. The business of stratification was much more energetic this year than usual from the fact that a genuine German Fürstin honored the waters with her presence. The princess called upon to present her daughter, and the ceremony took place 2 days after their arrival. Kitty, dressed in a very simple toilet, that is to say, a very elegant Parisian costume, made a deep and graceful curtsy. The Fürstin said, "I hope that the roses will soon bloom again in this pretty little face." And immediately the Sherbatsky family found themselves in the fixed and definite walk in life from which it was impossible to descend. They made the acquaintance of an English lady, of a German Gräfin, and her son, who had been wounded in the late war, of a scientific man from Sweden, and of a Mr. Knut and his sister. But for the most part the Sherbatskys spontaneously formed social relations among the people from Moscow, among them Marya Evgenyevna Rchivaya and her daughter, whom Kitty did not like because she likewise was ill on account of a love affair gone wrong, and a colonel whom she always had seen in society and known by his uniform and his epaulets, and who now, with his little eyes and his bare neck and flowery cravats, seemed to Kitty supremely ridiculous, and the more unendurable because she could not get rid of him. When they were all established, it became very tiresome to Kitty, the more as her father had gone to Carlsbad, and she was left alone with her mother. She could not interest herself in her old acquaintances, because she knew that she should not find anything novel in them, and so her principal amusement was in studying the people whom she had never seen before. It was in accordance with Kitty's nature to see the best side of people, especially of strangers. And now her remarks on the characters and scenes that she amused herself in studying were colored with a good-natured exaggeration of their peculiarities. Of all these people, there was one in whom she took a most lively interest. It was a young girl who had come to the baths with a Russian lady named Madame Stahl. Madame Stahl, it was said, belonged to the high nobility, but she was unable to walk and was seen only occasionally going in a wheelchair to take the baths. But it was rather from pride than illness, as the princess judged, that she failed to make any acquaintances among the Russians. The young girl was her nurse, and as Kitty discovered, she frequently went to those who were seriously ill, and there were many at the baths, and with the same natural, unaffected zeal, took care of them. This young Russian girl, Kitty discovered, was no relation to Madame Stahl, nor even a hired companion. Madame Stahl called her simply Varenka, but her friends called her Mademoiselle Varenka. Kitty not only found it extremely interesting to study the relations between this young girl and Madame Stahl and other unknown persons, but an irresistible sympathy drew her towards Mademoiselle Varenka, and when their eyes met she imagined that it pleased her also. Mademoiselle Varenka, though still quite young, seemed to lack youthfulness. Her age might be guessed as either 19 or 30. In spite of the lack of color in her face, she was rather good-looking. If, on analysis, her head had not been rather large and her figure too slight, she would have been considered handsome. But she was not one to please men. She made one think of a beautiful flower, which, though still preserving its petals, was faded and without perfume. Varenka seemed always absorbed in some important duty, and never at leisure to amuse herself with idle nothings, and the example of this busy life made Kitty feel that perhaps if she imitated her she would find what she was seeking with so much trouble, an interest in life, a sentiment of the dignity of life which would never have anything in common with the social relationship of young women to young men, which now seemed to Kitty like an ignominious exposure of merchandise to be taken by the highest bidder. The more she studied her unknown friend, the more she longed to become acquainted with her, feeling that she was a creature of such perfection, that she would like to take her as an example of herself. The young girls passed each other many times every day, and Kitty's eyes seemed always to say, "Who are you? What are you? Are you not in truth the charming person that I imagine you to be? But for heaven's sake," the look seemed to add, "don't think that would be indiscreet enough to demand your acquaintance. It is sufficient for me to admire you, and to love you." "I also love you, and you are very, very charming, and I would love you still better if I had time," replied the look of the stranger, and indeed she was always busy. Now it was the children of a Russian family whom she was taking home from the baths, now an invalid who had to be wrapped in his plaid, or another whom she was trying to amuse, or getting confections from some sick person, or bringing another his coffee and cream. One morning, soon after the arrival of the Sherbatskys, a couple appeared who immediately became the object of rather unfriendly criticism. A tall, stooping man with enormous hands, black eyes, at once innocent and terrifying, and wearing an old, ill-fitting short coat. The woman was no less outrée in her costume. Her face was marked with smallpox, but was kindly in expression. Kitty instantly recognized that they were Russians, and her imagination was at work constructing a touching romance, of which they were the principal characters, when the princess learned, by consulting the Kurlist, that this was Nikolai Levin and Marya Nikolaevna, and she put an end to Kitty's romance by telling her what a bad man this Levin was. The fact that he was Konstantin Levin's brother, even more than her mother's words, made these two people particularly repulsive to Kitty. This man, with a strange motion of his head, became odious to her, and she imagined that she could read in his great wild eyes, as they persistently followed her, sentiments of irony and ill will. As far as possible, she avoided meeting him.